Hello everyone and greetings to all of you watching this video once again, my dear Naga brothers and sisters and friends from other communities. I hope you all are doing well. It's been quite some time I've not been speaking in a video like this, but whenever the need arises, I'll be doing that. And today this video specifically is a report of what I have written as an attempt to clarify, to dispel the various misconceptions about the Naga struggle and to explain the roots of the movement and then to restore the truth that has been distorted and to promote a little bit of respect among one another. Because if we look at social media, it is full of insults, full of mockery, and full of disrespect for one another that we can see in various posts. And so I wanted to do a little bit of clarification so that by the end of this video, at least we will have better understanding about one another. So what I have written, what I have prepared is actually a summary of a reply or response to so many hate comments or a lot of insults that has been thrown towards the Naga struggle, especially the Naga army. So all the comments, all the replies that I wanted to give, I just put them down together and I have written it. And that's what I wanted to present it to you today. And it's actually the truth behind the Naga movement. The Naga movement is actually a story of struggle, a story of domination, and then resistance and a struggle for dignity and identity. But we see that for too long, the Naga struggle has been misunderstood, has been misrepresented, mocked, and reduced to a very shallow labels. So we see that many call the Naga armies looters, goons, extortionists, and troublemakers and whatnot. You name it, we already see that in many comments. What about all the indigenous revolutionary armies from other groups like the Métis? They have the PLA and UNLF, the Misos under the MNF who fought the Indian Army. And then the Cookies, they have the KNA and KNO and other groups as well. And then other revolutionists in the Northeast region. Can we call all those people as goons and looters as well? I don't think they are terrorists in the real sense as human beings. Everything has a reason and they have a valid point from where they started the struggle. So we should not call them directly looters and goons. Yes, we all should stand against the bad elements because I also stand with the common people that we should stand against these threats, against these extortions, against this misuse of power, misuse of gunpower, and so on. So we have to work towards that and then stand against that. But what I'm trying to say is we should not directly go into this habit of labeling all of them under one category or inside put them inside one single box and call them names. We should not ignore the background, how things began. It is very easy to give names, very easy to blame, but not easy to go back to the roots, understand and address the issues and resolve them. We are all indigenous people of this land. We should not go by such harsh words and labels on each other. Those who have been attacking the Nagas, maybe they're unaware of the fact that the Nagas are still in an unresolved political conflict. Maybe they are even ignoring the fact that not only the Nagas but all the indigenous people of this region have had a conflict with India at one point in time. And we did not start this conflict. We did not invite them to come and fight with us. Actually, we need to understand that it was forced upon us by the outsiders. This is the basis of the Naga struggle. The Nagas have not been defeated, they have not surrendered, but they have been pushed to their limits, they have been pushed to the margins. And we need to know that. And we are now in this present time pointing fingers at one another. We need to go back a little bit in time to understand how things began. The Nagas did not begin this struggle to have the conflict with their neighbors. It's never like that. Long before the British arrived, all indigenous people of Northeast India lived under their own systems of governance, each distinct in structure and character. The Plain kingdoms had established centralized polities. For example, the Ahoms had their kingdom with an organized administrative system. The Meitei kingdom governed with defined territorial authority. The Dimasa kingdom had their own controlled areas with structured political systems. They control their respective territories through organized military and administrative power. In contrast, the hill dwellers, including the Nagas, the Misos, the Kukis, and other hill tribes, operated under entirely different principles. Political authority was local, rooted in the village level, not the kingdom. For the Nagas specifically, each village functioned as an independent unit, a small republic with its own system of self governance. The villages were not isolated islands, they were connected through intricate networks of clan relationships that crossed village boundaries and shared ceremonies that reinforced common identity and trade. This was not a perfect world, of course. There were conflicts between villagers conflicts between villages over land, resources, and old grievances. Raids were common, but these were internal matters. Critically, it was their own world, governed by their own rule, free from external control. They remain a world apart, self governing, autonomous, until the arrival of the colonial power, and that changed everything. So, when the British came, village after village was brought under colonial administration, taxes were imposed, new borders were drawn. British officers replaced village councils as the final authority. The old system of self governance was dismantled piece by piece, replaced with colonial structures that served British interests. The Nagas did not invite this, they resisted with every means available. British records themselves document fierce resistance, punitive expeditions, village burnings, and hanging of leaders who refused to submit. The resistance was not rebellion, it was a defense. The British were the aggressors, and the Nagas were defending what had always been theirs. When India gained independence in 1947, the British left, but the colonial system stayed. India inherited the same administrative machinery, the same borders, the same structures of control that the British had built. The territories of the Naga people, which had been forcefully incorporated into British India, were now expected to become part of independent India without question, without consultation, without consent. This is where the conflict truly began. As early as 1918, educated Nagas formed the Naga Club, one of the first organized political bodies in the region. In 1929, the Naga Club submitted a memorandum to the Simon Commission, a British body reviewing the constitutional reforms in India. The memorandum was clear and direct. It stated that the Nagas had never been part of any Indian kingdom, never ruled by any Indian power, and never had any political relationship with India. It requested that when the British left, the Nagas should be left alone to govern themselves as they had done before colonization. The request was ignored. A little earlier, there had even been attempts to establish a Naga Raj, a proposed unified Naga kingdom that would bring together the various Naga tribes under a single political structure, free from external taxes and taxation. This movement under Haiposa Dwanang and Rani Gaidinliu, though it did not succeed in creating a formal kingdom, reflected the early political consciousness among the Nagas and their desire for self-governance and unity in the face of external pressures. As India moved towards independence, Naga leaders intensified their efforts. In 1947, the Naga National Council, led by Angami Zapu Fizo, declared Naga independence one day before India's independence. The declaration was not made in anger or hatred. It was made in the belief that since the Nagas had never been part of India politically, historically, or culturally, they had the right to determine their own future. The declaration was based on a simple principle: no people should be forced into a political union they did not choose or did not consent to. To demonstrate the strength of public sentiment, the Naga National Council conducted a plebiscite in 1951, in which an overwhelming majority of the Nagas voted in favor of Naga independence. 99.9% of those who participated voted for a sovereign Naga nation. So, this plebiscite, though not recognized by the government of India, reflected the widespread support for self determination among the Naga people and underscored that the movement was not merely the ambition of a few leaders but represented a collective political will. India rejected both the Naga independence and the plebiscite. The Naga demand for self determination was dismissed as secessionism, as rebellion, and as treason. What followed was not dialogue, but force. The Indian government responded with military operations, arrests, and imposition of the Armed Forces Special Power Act in 1958, which gave sweeping powers to the military. in Naga areas. The villages were burned, leaders were imprisoned, civilians were caught in the crossfire. The Naga resistance, which had started as a political movement seeking peaceful negotiation, was pushed underground. One of the most common criticisms leveled against the Naga movement is concerning taxation. The government of the People's Republic of Nagaland, or the GPRN, and the federal government of Nagaland, or the FGN, along with other Naga nationalist groups, impose taxes on the population. Critics call this extortion, they call it looting, they call the Naga freedom fighters goons. But this criticism reveals either ignorance of history or deliberate misrepresentation, because every revolutionary movement in the world has relied on contributions from the people it represents. During India's own freedom struggle, the Indian National Congress collected funds and imposed levies and mobilized resources from the population. Can we call them extortionists? Were they looters? No, they were freedom fighters funding a movement for independence. Across the world, this pattern repeats. African liberation movements, Southeast Asian uprisings, Latin American guerrilla forces all maintain themselves through contributions, taxes, and resources collected from the people they represent. In any unresolved political conflict, especially where a parallel government exists outside formal state structures, taxation is not a crime. It is organizational survival. It keeps the movement alive. It sustains the political continuity of a struggle that is still unresolved. Meanwhile, the Indian state collects GST, income tax, road tax, toll tax, custom duties, service taxes, and countless other forms of revenue from its citizens. Nobody calls that looting because it is legal, it is recognized and conducted by a sovereign state. The Naga groups do not enjoy that level of recognition and legitimacy. They do not have the international legitimacy or a fully developed state apparatus, but they do have a political movement that requires funding, administration, and resources to sustain itself after more than 7 decades of political struggle. To condemn Naga taxation as illegitimate while accepting state taxation is rightful is not correct. This is not to say that the Naga system is perfect. There are abuses, there is corruption. There are individuals who misuse authority for personal gain. These problems are real and must be addressed with honesty. Now, many people also complain that Naga taxation is not reflected in any developmental work, but such criticisms miss a basic point. The Naga nationalist governments cannot undertake full-scale developmental works or projects when they are operating as parallel governments in exile, without sovereignty, without international recognition, and under constant political pressure. A movement in struggle cannot perform like an established state like India. Likewise, many people also often speak about the top Naga leaders living in comfort and luxury. Okay, we need to address that. I'm not justifying that. But have we ever paused for a moment to consider the decades of hardship, the years spent in jungles, the soldiers who never returned home, the families torn apart, and the sacrifices made by these soldiers for the Naga cause? This is not a justification for the wrongdoings. It is just an invitation to see the whole picture before we start condemning and pointing fingers at them. And if we are to discuss comfort and privilege, why do we not question the luxurious lifestyles of the top Indian politicians and bureaucrats at a time when millions are suffering from poverty? Criticism must be fair, not selective. India is an established republic with constitutional obligations to its people, yet much of the northeast regions remain underdeveloped and marginalized. We need to address that too. So to compare India, which is already a sovereign state, with the Naga revolutionary groups still engaged in a struggle is intellectually dishonest and intellectually ignorant. One is a recognized nation state, the other is a movement striving to survive. The logic simply does not match. The issue is not taxation, the issue is the unaddressed political question that created the taxation in the first place. Until that question is resolved, the struggle continues. Few critics ask the real question: why does a political conflict that began more than 70 years ago still remain unresolved? Why has the government of India failed to address the fundamental issues that gave rise to this movement? Why has there been no meaningful political settlement that respects Naga history, identity, and political aspirations? The real question is not whether taxation is legitimate, but why a political conflict that began over 70 years ago remains unresolved. Why has the Indian state failed to address the core grievances? Why has there been no meaningful political settlement that recognizes Naga history and identity? These are the real questions we should be asking. The Nagas did not start this conflict, as I always repeat. The Naga movement did not begin out of hatred, greed, or criminal intent. It began because people who had governed themselves for centuries were denied that right. It began because colonialism ended for India but continued for the Nagas. It began because the promise of freedom that was made to India was denied to the Nagas. And it continues today because those issues remain unresolved. The questions have not been answered. The grievances have not been addressed. The injustice has not been acknowledged. As long as history is denied, as long as identity is dismissed, as long as the demand for dignity is met with labels like goons, extortionists, and so on, the struggle will continue. The Nagas did not start this conflict. India must acknowledge what was done, how the Nagas were incorporated without consent, and why that matters. It requires Naga groups to unite around a common vision and to prioritize the welfare of their people over factional interests. And it requires all of us, everyone who cares about justice, peace, and human dignity, to stop using labels and start seeking understanding. Only then we can have a real solution. Only then we can have the real peace. Only then the long standing conflict will come to an end. Thank you and Kuknalim.